So I like to think I'm pretty good about seeing all the Disney live action reboots, as I am a huge Disney fan. But when Disney Plus launched and they had The Mandalorian and all these other things on there and just this surplus of shows to watch, I missed out on watching this one. So let's get to it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Lady and the Tramp. So as you can see, this is going to be a review of the 2019 version. I will go back and review the original and the sequel. I'm a big fan of those movies. If you guys have been watching the channel for a while, I'm a big fan of Disney overall, really thoroughly and love the world of Disney, whether it's the theme parks or the movies, the TV shows. You know, I just grew up with that world, and so things like Lady and the Tramp definitely hold a very special place in my heart. And I like to say that I'm pretty proud about the fact that I've seen all of the live action reboots in theaters or pretty much right when they first came out, and I kind of just missed this one. It came out on Disney Plus. If you guys have been watching the channel, I'm pretty bad with keeping up with streaming movies, just so many of them, and yeah, I just never got around to this one. And I'm super excited to be joined by my buddy Chad Sabourin. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. We're going to be hearing from him in just a little bit. First time here on the channel, so thank you so much for joining me here in this video to talk about Lady and the Tramp. I know when I first sent it to him, he had sent me a collab to do on his channel for the girl with the dragon tattoo, and then he's like, hey, do you want me to do something for your channel? I'm like, yeah, here, let's watch Lady and the Tramp. Two very different movies, but again, we're going to be hearing from him in just a little bit, and let's get into my thoughts on the 2019 Lady and the Tramp reboot. What I can say about this movie overall is I had a good time. I did really enjoy it, and as a longtime fan of the original, I think that this movie does a good job of embodying that original feel and vibe, and there's a lot of moments that are recreated in this movie like they do in a lot of these movies that definitely put a smile on my face and definitely took me back to being a kid when I would watch Lady and the Tramp all the time. Now, by no means at all does this even contend with the original. I think outside of my nostalgia for the original film, this is just a decent movie. This is just a good movie. There's not really much to this version that really makes it stand out too much more. I think the greatest scene that they recreated from the original in this one easily is the scene with them eating the spaghetti. I think that everything about the humans that they involved there, the music, the classic, song from Lady and the Tramp, and just seeing them kind of, have that nice romantic moment. By the time you get to that point in the film, I think it's the best part of the movie. It definitely put a smile on my face and got me just a little bit emotional while watching it, which is definitely the main thing I wanted to feel while watching this movie. Beyond that, I found that a lot of the voice acting sometimes didn't really emulate the character from the past. And I don't necessarily need it to be the exact same, but as I was watching the movie, there just wasn't that same charm to some of the characters that I think the original had. But there is some really great casting in this film that I think definitely lends itself to being a great new iteration to these characters. In the role of Lady, we have Tessa Thompson, and she's the one, I'll say right out of the gate, who I felt was the most miscast. She's a beautiful actress and she's fantastic in so many other things that I've seen her in, but there's a delicacy to the voice and the feel of Lady in the original film and in the sequel, and in this one she doesn't have that. There's a spunk to her in this one that I just didn't really latch onto too much. Lady didn't really seem as delicate and as like a nice flower in this one as she is in the original. She seemed a little bit more spunky, a little bit more attitudey, and the voice given to her by Tessa Thompson, I just didn't feel like it fit the character, and a part of that is coming from my attachment to the original movie, but yeah, she was the one that just didn't feel like a new iteration that definitely still emulated that same feel of the character. In a lot of ways she did, don't get me wrong, it wasn't completely like a terrible performance or anything like that, and it's not even a terrible performance. It was just the one that I think the voice didn't really fit the character as much as the others. In the role of Tramp, we have Justin Theroux, and I thought he was great. I thought he was the best of the two leads, and I thought that he very much embodied what Tramp was in the original films while also doing his own thing. Outside of that, you also have Janelle Monáe in this film, Sam Elliott, and a few others that I really thoroughly enjoyed hearing their voices. I think that they did a good job of lending themselves to these characters and emulating those original characters while bringing something different to them. You also have a very different interpretation of the Siamese cat song from the original, which has definitely been marked as one of those older racist moments in movies. I never really mind it, but I get it. I understand the perspective. I'm not going to sit here and die on a hill for that. So what I will say about this one is that they did a good job of having the cats come in, having that one scene with a different kind of song, making it kind of make sense for this version of the movie. So it didn't take me out of it, but it was just definitely something that made me miss the original just a little bit. But again, I understand wholeheartedly why they decided to go a different direction, and I like what they did in replacement. One other thing that I want to talk about, obviously, is the animals. This movie does a really good job of blending CG animals that are talking as well as live live action animals that they kind of manipulated the mouth to make them look like they were talking. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I enjoyed how it looked overall, but there are times where the dogs will go from looking very realistic because they're real dogs to incredibly cartoony, and sometimes it just kind of creates an imbalance in the tone visually because you do have that shift from something that's very tangible and very real to something that's a little bit more cartoony. But I think it goes without saying that I liked the film. I thought it was a good, cute time, and I think kids that are growing up today watching this movie are going to have nice memories of it growing up. Does it even hold a candle to the original for me? No, but I do think this is a nice, sweet version, and I understand why this one went to Disney Plus instead of having the theatrical release that most of them have. Now that I've given my general thoughts on the movie, let's go ahead and hear what my buddy Chad had to say about this.
So to start my half off, I wanted to say, Anthony and Perez, thank you very much for having me on your channel. Hopefully this will be one of many collaborations that we do in the near future. Again, I really do appreciate it, especially Lady and the Tramp 2019. Truth be told, Lady and the Tramp 2019 is a movie that a couple years ago, I did actually very much so want to see, but I personally am not really good when it comes to keeping up with movies that are on streaming services. There's just too many. So when Anthony messaged me and said, hey, you want to watch this and, collaborate? And I was like, heck yeah. Gives me a reason to actually sit down and watch it. Lady and the Tramp, for those of you that don't know, is actually a remake. The original came out in 1955. It was an animated film. I did see the animated film a couple times. I did not watch it in preparation for this review, though. In fact, I haven't seen the original in probably 10 years. But that being said, over 10 plus years having seen it, I still remember the story, the basic outline and everything. And the original I remember enjoying. It wasn't one of my favorite animated films growing up, that's for sure. But it was still something that I remember enjoying and being quite fond of. So, cut to 65 years later and they remade it. I wasn't quite sure what to think about what it was going in. So I kept an open mind. And I have to say, after seeing it, I felt disappointed. I don't think this movie was terrible. By no means do I think it's terrible. I've read some reviews online that say it's one of the worst movies that they've seen, or that it was just really bad. I don't think that. I don't think that in the slightest, actually. And I'll get into that, in the negatives. Because here's the thing. In terms of positives, there are a decent amount of positives to be had in this movie. For one thing, the production design. This movie looks very high budget. I believe it was like $150 million. And you can tell it was splashed on screen through the production design, the costume design, and the makeup. These are things that are to be expected with Disney movies. This is something that you really do notice. You look at like The Lion King or Aladdin, or like Oscar and Powerful. These are movies that the budget can clearly be seen on screen. And it shows. It is very nice in these categories. Cinematography is also rock solid. I did like the movement of the camera and everything, especially that last scene. The last scene in the movie, it had like a long take that, was just pulling back and everything. Well, I should say not pulling back, zooming out. And it was quite impressive, honestly. I very much so enjoyed that. And I will say this also. The cast, although I do think that they are somewhat wasted, because truth be told, if you didn't know who the actors were, you wouldn't really be able to differentiate between them. But I will say this, the acting for the most part in terms of voice acting is solid. It's nothing really memorable to write home about, but they get the job done, that's for sure. And the visual effects itself is pretty solid. It's definitely a step up from like Air Bud, or Air Buddies, like stuff like that. It's definitely a step up from that. But there is still a couple moments here and there where it's kind of like not really that convincing. But for the most part, it still looks really good. And I think that is mostly because they did probably use real dogs. I don't know, I could be wrong. I should have looked that up, so I do apologize. But that's where the positives end for me, because I want to get to the negatives. So this is something that, if you're new to my channel, this is something that I have been talking about for quite some time, since Disney's been doing these live action remakes. I feel like Disney has just been doing copy and paste. And look, as someone that has made feature-length movies, I get it. It's a difficult process. It really is. But the love of making a film just doesn't really seem to be showcased through the story, characters, writing. It just doesn't seem to be fleshed out through that. It seems like the bare minimum is put into that. And it's a shame, too, because, again, it's all face value. You look at the original movie or the other, original movies that got remade by Disney in terms of live action. Those are movies that when you watch the original, they're a lot shorter than their remakes. I mean, for crying out loud, the original Lady and Tramp, I believe, was like 76 minutes, and then this is nearly 40 minutes longer. And guess what? The original has a lot better character development. And it's because the original doesn't have face value. It has stuff that you can actually dissect and look into more so. Versus the remake, it's all face value. It's what you look at is what you get. That's quite simple. There's nothing really hidden or, to speak of. It's a shame too, because again, I wanted to like the character development. I wanted to like the storytelling, but it's all at face value. The other thing I wanted to mention is the score. The score is very unmemorable, which is a shame because for me, scores in films are very important. Scores or soundtracks. I prefer scores, but scores in film are very important for myself. So when I hear a score that just sounds very, very bland, it's a shame. Also, the pacing and tone also clash. A lot of times the pacing feels very uneven. There are moments that obviously are engaging, then there are other moments that don't feel more so as much. The tone is also a bit inconsistent as well. And by that, I mean, you have a lot of scenes that are very light, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a very jarring scene that's supposed to be really serious. And me as an audience member was kind of taken aback. I was like, whoa. Sometimes that can work. Sometimes, you will have directors do that intentionally. But I felt like more so with this, it just kind of, because it was towards the end when this happened, it just felt like they had to try to get to it because, well, the movie's about to end. Speaking of which, the ending, it just wasn't really memorable besides that, obviously cool zoom out shot. But again, I personally was disappointed by this movie. I'm not a big fan of the copy and paste formula that, Disney seems to be doing with these live action movies, but I get it if people like this. This is a movie that I'm not angry that it was made because, again, I get why these movies are made. I truly do. People like animated films for sure, but they want to see how these movies would obviously hold up in terms of live action. And for myself, most of them just haven't. I personally, Lady and the Tramp, I do think it does have some, technical merits for sure. But overall, I was left disappointed and cold. And that's why, for me, Lady and the Tramp, I'll be giving a 2 out of 5 star rating. So, yeah, no hot sauce rating. I found it to be disappointing, unfortunately. But I am very much so happy that Anthony A. Perez had me. Again, Anthony, you are the best. Thank you very much. I'm down to review anything in the future with you. Obviously, I very, very was happy to be on this channel. So, thanks again, Anthony. And, yeah. Very much so appreciate it. And also, guys, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll get you guys later.
A big thanks to Chad for being here in this video. Super happy to have you in a video for the very first time and hopefully the first of many. And yeah, it seems like you pretty much enjoyed the film on a lot of levels, but you weren't crazy about it, I think you definitely gave it a lower ranking than I would. I don't really do rankings or rating here on the channel, but I appreciate you giving your honest thoughts, and I definitely could see where you were coming from in a lot of areas. This isn't a movie that's going to work for everybody. It's not a movie that's going to excite everyone. I think people who have long-term attachment to the original film are going to be able to easily kind of dive into this one a lot more and feel the emotional weight of these moments, because there is an element of things that are kind of underdeveloped and rushed in this one. And sometimes with these movies, what is a pretty short story when in the original is kind of expanded upon and kind of drags out a little bit. And this movie, I think, has a little bit of that at times. But I was never bored while watching. I was definitely hooked into what was happening. I was definitely into the story of Lady and the Tramp throughout this, even though I already know where it was going to go. And I really enjoyed this version of the characters. I do have to say the one that really took me out of it the most, though, without a doubt, is Tessa Thompson. Not that she's a bad actress, and not that even that she gives a bad performance, because I do like her in a lot of stuff. I love her in the MCU, and I even liked her in the latest Men in Black movie, even though that wasn't really a great movie. But I've enjoyed her in anything I've ever seen her in, and yeah, when it comes to this movie, yeah, she just didn't have the same charm, feel, and vibe that I look for when it comes to Lady from the previous films. So yeah, that's going to wrap up my thoughts on Lady and the Tramp 2019. It's on Disney Plus if anybody's interested. I do highly recommend checking it out. I think it's worth a watch. I will say the human element, which was never really a good part in the originals, is definitely really weak here. You know what I mean? For a live action movie, you expect a little bit more. If you're going to expand the length of the film, expand what's happening in the narrative, they could have at least made the humans and their story something to kind of hold on to a little bit more. Throughout the course of the film, they're just kind of there to get things moving, and sometimes they just kind of buy into things, or they just kind of go with something very easily, or they're just kind of there. So the human element, without a doubt, is weak. It made sense in those older films because those human elements didn't really need to be there. They could be faceless characters, and it was really mainly about the animals, whereas in this one, they do kind of keep the humans in the story enough, and the acting on the human side and that whole feel and vibe is pretty bad. But I did enjoy the set design and the costume design in the film on the humans that I think was pretty solid. But the human element was definitely the cheesier part, and I think the best part and the more emotional part of the film is definitely with the animals, which makes the most sense. So Lady and the Tramp 2019, a big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.